This is a reading of The Religious Instruction of the Negros by Rev.Charles Colcock Jones, published in 1832. Read for you by Keith Stump. Note, I found this one of the most vile and disgusting pieces of writing I have ever encountered. I am reading it for its historical value, and in no wise do I support a single word in it. Also note that usually when I do my readings, I make 2 recordings and use the best portions from each. I shall not be doing that this time because I don't think I can stomach reading this twice, so please forgive any mistakes or stumbles over words. And now, the religious instruction of the Negros, a sermon delivered before associations of planters in Liberty and McIntosh counties, Georgia, by the Rev.Charles Colcock Jones of Savannah, 4th edition, published 1832. This excellent address was twice delivered, as will be seen by Mr. Jones' notice, before associations of Southern planters and committed for publication at their request. A 4th edition is now issued gratuitously for the purpose of extending its circulation and of bringing before the community in an unexceptionable form a safe, practicable, and efficient plan for promoting the religious instruction of their Negroes. The subject recommends itself at once not only to the Christian, but to everyone who believes that the success of the gospel is identified with the good morals and temporal prosperity of the community. Every planter who may receive a copy of this address is earnestly requested to give it a perusal. It was written by a Southern gentleman who hopes to spend his life among Southern planters in carrying into execution, as far as may be, the plan proposed. Several counties in Georgia have already adopted it with success. Why may it not be adopted in Virginia, North Carolina, and other states? Everything connected with the subject depends, of course, entirely upon the wishes of the planters themselves. It is very desirable, then, that they should give it a fair examination. The following address has been delivered within a few weeks, before 2 societies formed for the religious instruction of the Negroes, one in McIntosh and the other in Liberty County, and by both sessions it was requested for publication. It is my earnest desire that it may awaken the attention of the public to a subject long neglected, but of vital importance to us as citizens of the South, whether we consider it in a civil or in a moral point of view. The address appears as it was delivered and refers exclusively to plantation Negroes. Charles C. Jones, Savannah, Georgia, May 30th, 1831. Address, etc. He said unto them, Go ye into all the world, and preach the gospel to every creature. Mark 16:15. Men and brethren, the Lord Jesus was standing on the Mount of Olives surrounded by his disciples. Beneath them lay Jerusalem with its walls and palaces and towers and holy temple lighted up by the risen sun, and around, as far as the eye could reach, the cities of Palestine, peering above the foliage of the forest, or standing above the plains, the hills, the valleys covered with fields of grain and vineyards and habitations of men. The work which his Father had given him to do was now finished. He was about to ascend to the right hand of God. The bright cloud which was to receive him out of their sight was fast floating along in the clear blue sky, to overshadow the place where he stood. And what now should be his last commands to his disciples? He seemed with them from the mount to survey the world. He had taught them that he was the Redeemer of the world. He had taught them that the field in which this truth should be sown was the world. Then, directing their eyes abroad on the scene before them, and spreading forth his hands over it, he cries out, Go ye into all the world, and preach the gospel to every creature. To procure the power and privilege of giving this command, Christ died and rose again. The disciples were the representatives of his church on earth. The command is to his church, and is of perpetual obligation. It is obligatory not only upon ministers of the church, to whom the office of preaching the gospel is specifically committed, but also upon all members of the church to whom God has given the ability to support the preaching of the gospel, or talents that qualify them to become teachers of the unlearned. The command implies that all men in the world, no matter of what nation or complexion or condition, are the moral and accountable creatures of God, that they are lost and need the gospel of salvation. Whenever, therefore, any people come within the range of our influence, we, who are acting under this command, have two questions, and but two to settle. Do they need the gospel? And has God put it in our power to give them the gospel? The Negroes of our country come fairly within the range of our influence. We believe they are men, creatures of God, and like ourselves are moving onward to the retributions of eternity. And as philanthropists and Christians, we are bound to propose to ourselves and to answer these questions in regard to them. 1. Do they need the gospel? We can return but one answer to this question, and it is an affirmative one. The description which the Apostle Paul, in his epistle to the Romans, gave to the heathen world will apply, with very little abatement, to our Negroes. They lie, steal, blaspheme, are slothful, envious, malicious, inventors of evil things, deceivers, covenant breakers, implacable, unmerciful. They are greatly wanting in natural affection, improvident without understanding, and grossly immoral. Chastity is an exceedingly rare virtue. Polygamy is common, and there is little sacredness attached to the marriage contract. It is entered into, for the most part, without established forms, and dissolved at the will of the parties. Nor is there any sacredness attached to the Sabbath. It is a day of idleness and sleep, of sinful amusements, of visiting, or of labor. They are generally temperate through necessity. When ardent spirit can be obtained, they will freely drink it. Numbers of them do not go to church, and cannot tell us who Jesus Christ is, nor have they ever heard so much as the 10 Commandments read and explained. Of the professors of religion among them, there are many of questionable piety, who occasion the different churches great trouble in discipline, for they are extremely ignorant, and frequently are guilty of gross vices. We cannot go more fully into the moral condition of these people at present. Indeed, it is unnecessary. Generally speaking, they appear to us to be without hope and without God in the world, a nation of heathens in our very midst. And if we believe the testimony of our own eyes and ears, and the testimony of those who know these people most intimately, we must conclude that they need the gospel, and need it as much as any people in the world do. 2. Has God put it in our power to give them the gospel? We think that He has. The civil law does not forbid us to give them the gospel orally. We can therefore employ or permit men to visit our plantations for the purpose of instructing them, or we can undertake to instruct them ourselves. And having our plantations, the time and persons of our servants wholly under our control, we can arrange the manner and frequency of our instruction as we please, and the period of these instructions with as much punctuality and with as little interruption as we can arrange the morning and evening devotions of our own fireside. Our very children might become, to some extent, teachers by reading them the plain portions of the Bible, or plain tracts and things of such sort. And who can condemn us for doing what we conceive to be a duty, or who can hinder us? We infringe no law, neither do we violate any man's property or liberty. These two questions, then, being answered in the affirmative, it follows that we are in duty bound to give our Negroes the gospel. We are bound to give them the gospel by humanity. Were we to see a sheep fallen in a ditch, we would lift it out. Were our ox famishing in the stall, we would loose it and lead it away to watering. Much more, then, should we lift up our servants from the pit of moral pollution and death into which they have fallen. Much more should we strive to loose them from the bonds of sin and Satan, and lead away their famishing souls to the water of life. How much better is a man than a sheep or an ox? When their bodies are diseased, we physic and nurse them. And how can we neglect their diseased souls? Are not their souls more precious than their bodies? We are bound to give them the gospel by consistency. We are actually contributing of our substance, or giving our prayers and best wishes to the various benevolent operations of the present day. We pray that Christ's kingdom may come, and that his gospel may be preached to every nation and people under the whole heaven. In consistency with this prayer, we have assisted in sending missionaries to the heathen, thousands of miles from us, and to destitute settlements in our country. We have assisted in printing Bibles and tracts, and in sending them to every family in our land and in foreign lands. We have assisted in preaching the gospel in our public prisons, in the harbors of our seaport cities, and to those who do business on the great waters. We have assisted in gathering the children of all parents into Sabbath schools, and we have assisted in staying the swellings of the fiery waves of intemperance. But what have we done for our poor Negroes? With shame we must confess that we have done nothing. An enemy, nay, a friend, might well say to us, how can you contribute to all these benevolent works and pray for their success? How can you pray for Christ's kingdom to come? How can you pray that God would enable you to do something to hasten its coming, while you are neglecting a people perishing for lack of vision around your very doors? And what answer could we return in justification for our conduct? None. We could do no more than honestly confess our inconsistency. We cannot cry out against the papist for withholding the Scriptures from the common people and keeping them in ignorance of the way of life, for we withhold the Bible from our servants and keep them in ignorance of it, while we will not use the means to have it read and explained to them. We have been shocked at the death of 40,000 men annually by intemperance, and our community has been thrown into commotion by it. But it is probably that as many die annually among the Negroes in slaveholding states, whose death is equally as hopeless as that of the drunkard, and yet we have not thought of this. Neither have we felt it. We have been horror-struck at the cruelties of the heathen, who cast their aged and infirm and their tender infants into the rivers to be devoured by crocodiles. But we have manifested no emotion of horror at abandoning the souls of our servants to the adversary, the roaring lion that walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Our inconsistency in withholding the gospel from our servants, both as philanthropists and as Christians, is most glaring, nor can we deny it. We are bound to give them the gospel by the spirit of the religion which we possess. Religion is comprehended in one word: love. Love to God, love to man. This love, as manifested to man, consists in a tender regard for his interest and an earnest desire for his happiness, not so much, however, in reference to this world as to that to come. Hence it is that the Christian feels such an interest in the conversion and salvation of men, that he is willing to make any sacrifice to obtain this object. Indeed, the very design of God in converting men is to promote his glory by using them as instruments in the conversion of others. It is therefore an indication of radical defect of Christian character, or most lamentable, may we not say criminal, ignorance of duty, when the Christian is insensible to the condition of those who are perishing around him, and makes no effort for their salvation. The desire of the Christian to give men the gospel should be in proportion to the difficulty to be surmounted and the need in which they stand of it. The golden rule of conduct which Christ prescribes to his followers is this: all things whatsoever ye would men would do unto you, do ye even so to them. Admitting, then, that we were in the condition of the Negro, and he in our condition, able to read and appreciate the gospel, experimentally acquainted with it, a partaker of its privileges and its eternal hopes, would we not think it his duty to make known to us the gospel, which is everything to perishing sinners, and which alone could yield us happiness in our humble lot? We surely should. And what would we think of him if he denied it to us? Could we believe that he possessed the spirit of his religion? Could we believe that he sincerely believed and felt all the amazing and soul-stirring truths which it contains? No, we could not. Shall we not, then, by passing over the spiritual wants of our servants, be deficient in the very spirit of our religion? We feel that we shall, and we tremble to think that should we continue to neglect them, our neglect might not only shut their souls out of heaven, but our own. And once more, we are bound to give them the gospel by the express command of God. We are commanded by Christ to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, as we have seen. But more particularly is it said to us, as owners of slaves, Masters, give unto your servants that which is just and equal, knowing that ye also have a master in heaven. Colossians 4:1. i.e., to treat your servants with justice and in an equitable manner, for you have a master in heaven, to whom you are accountable for your treatment of them. Now, we cannot come up to the spirit and letter of these commands unless we give them the gospel. Yes, our servants are men. They need the gospel. God has put it into our power to give them the gospel, and we are bound to do it by humanity, by consistency, by the spirit of the religion we profess, and by the express command of God. This obligation has been resting upon us for years. May we not say that its age gives its weight? Yes, an awful weight. We have heretofore neglected our duty. If we continue to neglect it, we shall be, as heretofore, without excuse. We cannot excuse ourselves by saying that the Negroes have the gospel already. Their opportunities of hearing the gospel are limited. For although generally speaking all are permitted to go to church on Sabbath, yet only a part on the plantations can go on each Sabbath, as it is not permitted, nor can we say that it is desirable, that all should leave the plantations at a time. And even of this minority, and an exceeding small minority it is, where we reckon children and youth, only a part attend church, so that the majority do not hear the gospel for weeks and months together. And as it is among the whites, so it is among them. Many never go to church at all. But whenever the Negroes hear the preaching of the gospel, they hear it at a very great disadvantage. The sermons are almost wholly delivered to their masters, and are not only for the greater part inapplicable to them, but entirely above their comprehension, both as to language and thought. The gospel is preached to them in an unknown tongue. Occasionally they are particularly addressed while worshiping with their masters, and perhaps as often a regular discourse is delivered at their place of meeting. We have colored ministers and exhorters, but their numbers are wholly inadequate to the supply of Negroes. And while their ministrations are infrequent and conducted in great weakness, there are some of them whose moral character is justly suspected, and who may be considered blind leaders of the blind. Nor have the Negroes, at any other time than the Sabbath, any system of stated religious instruction, if we except a few plantations on which they are gathered together and instructed in the evenings. So that, on the whole, considering the fewness of the numbers that attend church, the disadvantage under which they hear the gospel, and the little attention which is paid to their private instructions on the plantations, we must say to our condemnation that our servants do not enjoy the privileges of the gospel, hence their ignorance of the nature of true religion and of its fundamental doctrines. Nor can we excuse ourselves by saying that they are incapable of receiving religious instruction. It is customary amongst us to entertain very low opinions of the intellectual capacity of the Negroes. Whether this be right or wrong, we leave every man to judge for himself, and to judge likewise whether their mental weakness is to be attributed to the circumstances of their condition, or to any difference as made by the author of their existence between them and other men. But to suppose them too ignorant to comprehend the plainer and more essential doctrines of Christianity is certainly to disregard the testimony of God's Word as well as the testimony of facts. It is said, God is no respecter of persons, but in every nation he that feareth him and worketh righteousness is accepted with him. And again, that he hath made of one blood all nations of men that dwell on the face of the earth. What then can be plainer that all men have one common origin, and that all are capable of exercising proper affections toward God? And this necessarily implies a capability of understanding the divine law, no matter under what dispensation of law they live, whether natural or revealed. If it be allowed that our Negroes are men, then these things are true in regard to them